It's a wild world out there, but some worlds are even wilder. Hi, my name is Tyler Hapney, and you're listening to Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of Dungeons and Dystopias. My name is Tyler Hapney. I am your host and game master. I've run hundreds of sessions to Cyberpunk Red and Dungeons and Dragons combined, and this podcast is a way for me to reconcile my thoughts on both of those systems. Today, we're going to be continuing our series on the new Night City 2045 book, going through two more districts of the island in Night City, and these are actually going to be our last districts of the island, because we are now finally going to be moving on to the north side next, which is going to have places like the NorCal Military Base, Watson, and Kabuki. So, maybe we could cover all three of those in the same episode. Who knows? But today we're going to be talking about the Reclamation Zone and the Old Combat Zone, and the last little parts of the sort of main central island that made up Night City, before all the other, districts are kind of added in, sort of, over time. So without much other business, we're going to get into the Reclamation Zone. And the Reclamation Zone is an interesting spot, to say the least. It is run by Santos Dorado, who is the head of a nomad clan that likes to travel primarily, or used to travel primarily, by rails. So, they're trained nomads, but they basically, the whole Dorado clan kind of looks over the Reclamation Zone. So it's all kind of run by nomads. Funny enough, formerly Snake Nation, not Aldecaldos. Well, there you go. There's a little bit of appearance from Snake Nation. Most of the Reclamation Zone population is nomads. Dorado clan, former nomads of Snake Nation. It's a lot of nomads. And it says here that roughly half of the clan is Muslim, descending from a community that formed in Mexico during the 1980s, and that the other half is fairly agnostic, though few travel to Little Europe or Laguna Bend to attend Mass on holidays. About 10% of the people living in the zone have joined up with the Dorados. So a lot of techs, drivers, stuff like that. The real Greece of America kind of stuff. They are the security down here is not police. They are in fact protected by a militia called Los Perros Guardianes. So they're pretty much like a private militia security force run entirely by the nomads, and nobody wants the NCPD rolling through here, so that's why they're taking care of things. This district is probably the youngest district, or one of the newest districts here in Night City, so there's not really a ton of, I guess, culture necessarily based around it, other than what you get out of the nomads. Yeah. South Night City Reclamation Zone, Nomad Central. Let's name some of these interesting locations you can find in the Reclamation Zone. Let's talk about Earl's Secondhand Shop. Earl's Secondhand Shop, a lot of these places have high security codes, by the way. So a lot of them are pretty well guarded. But Earl's Secondhand Shop, run by a fixer named Earl Mahoney, he sells secondhand goods at first-rate prices. So, yeah, a little expensive, but, in a place like the Reclamation Zone, I don't imagine first-rate goods are even like a possibility. Inside of Earl's Secondhand Shop, it's very claustrophobic. It's loaded with goods, junk, everything, wall to wall. It's really like a hoarder's paradise in there. Earl will accept payment in the form of cash or trade, but you'll also take services. So, who knows what exactly that could mean, but it does imply that he sells porn BDs out of the back of his place. So who knows? Let's talk about the Foundry Tech School. So, you could probably already guess what this is, but basically this tech school teaches
whatever you need in terms of technologically, from plumbing to cyberware repair, and of course, as we've already noted, these nomads love trains, so end cart train operation and maintenance, which is huge, um they seem to really put a lot of stake into the end cart system here in the reclamation zone. A lot of the people here know the end cart system. They've worked with the trains before. So it's no surprise that we have so much tied here to the uh the nomads and the sort of the end cart system. Gordon's Garage. Troy Gordon is a nomad for Tech 4, and it is, well, where you go if you're looking to turn your vehicle into something better. In fact, the exact quote it says in the book is a proper tank. So, if you're looking to make a punk knot, I think you should go to Gordon's Garage at the end of the day, because he's probably going to be the ones to help you out. There's also, of course, the McGee Speedway. That's right. It is a racetrack, but it's more now grown into a park where people kind of hang out, party, do whatever. Um, we've got Herschel's Crematorium, which, it's a crematorium. It's crazy. It's crazy that that there, I guess there'd be anything else. We've got Metal Mountain. It is a junkyard. It's run by a guy who is a Tech 2 by Mason. And, well, I mean, it's just a junkyard, man. It's just a giant heap of metal and junk. And yeah, I mean, reclamation zone makes sense. We, of course, have the end cart yards all throughout the reclamation zone. This is where a lot of the train sort of connections come in, a lot of the end cart connections here within the reclamation zone. And then, you know what? We'll move on to our next little bit here, because really there's not a lot about the reclamation zone. But hey, now we get to move on to the old combat zone. And if you thought security code 8 was pretty intense, well, guess what? This is the exact opposite. Security code 3, if you're in the old combat zone, it's a pretty low chance that anyone's going to show up to help you. But, anyways. The old combat zone. This is one of the older districts in Night City, and has, of course, been in dire straits for a little while. He is, well, for the last 2 decades, the old combat zone has thrived, and by thrived, I mean as best as you can, in what basically amounts to a post-apocalyptic movie set where the whole place is just crumbling apart and there's no infrastructure or support whatsoever. Great. Brick Coleman, who is a child of the old combat zone and a solo, is not a child. He has taken over as city manager for the old combat zone. He is a solo who's now just coming back to Night City after a while. And what he's witnessed out there as a solo, he's made sure to bring back to the old combat zone. So a lot of the people here in the old combat zone, as it says here, are split amongst a generational divide. There are older residents, known as the Faded, believe in a man named Lasky, who is an old solo, who, well, took the people into the old combat zone originally and sort of set people up maybe 20 years ago. And now we've kind of given way to Brick Coleman. But they mostly stay these old people, they mostly stay around the Warren. They're not really doing much. However, there are, of course, younger residents. And these people, a lot of them, work for or I guess not work for, but they've sort of crowded under the name Edge Runners Inc. And that is who works as security for this district. So, when you're thinking security for the old combat zone, don't think a corporation, don't think a company, don't even think a gang. It's just a bunch of edge runners, young edge runners who are looking to make their name and prove themselves here in Night City. There's one other major faction in the old combat zone, and that would be the gang, the Iron Sights. And of course, I think we've talked about the Iron Sights here before. very interesting gang. Nowadays being funded by the pharmacist Hornet, who has a huge connection on most of the drugs going through Night City, at least the pharmaceutical kind. But yeah, most of the security here is Edge Runners Inc., which is really, it's like a ragtag group of Edge Runners. That's really the best way to put it. There a lot of the tension between this old generation and this new generation it's been rising recently. People are a little bit at odds with each other, based off of, well, what they kind of want to do with the old combat zone. For instance, the old people, they really, really, really like the way it is. But obviously, ERI, they're pushing for, some deconstruction, some things to change around the area. And of course, this is all made even worse by the fact that the Iron Sights are at active war with the Red Chrome Legion, but are also extremely prevalent in the area. They've begun pushing beyond the southern edges of the gang's territory and now further into the old combat zone. So that's another thing you're going to have to deal with. We have some locations to go through. Don't you love it? So the first location we're going to talk about is, funny enough, a brothel named Alice's. Alice's is run by the Iron Sights on behalf of the Wang Fang Tong. It is a surprisingly well-managed and profitable brothel. I guess profitable for the old combat zone. The workers here lean towards more niche tastes, and, well, for enough money, they will chrome and sculpt an employee to fulfill almost any fantasy, from unusual exotics to androids to aliens and tentacle monsters. That is an exact quote from the book. Most of Alice's clientele are, of course, from wealthier parts of the city, so that's where you get a lot of that sleaze come from. Of course, a lot of attention here is avoided from some of the people who might be more interested by going to the old combat zone. But of course, that also kind of puts you at the mercy of the Iron Sights, doesn't it? So, I don't know. Just think about that one. There is the Arena. This is a warehouse that has been refurbished into, well, a roller derby sort of place, a place to go and, do some work. It is it's a place for people to go and kind of get off some steam. This is a place made in order to encourage the youth of the old combat zone to stay out of the gangs. Sort of worked. And both the Faded and the ERI, at Runner's Sake, really actually do seem to enjoy this place. So, that's one of the locations they could all sort of agree on. We have Flasher's Quarter, run by Mal Flasher DeVincher, who is a fixer of second rank. You can find him on the corner of Government and Effinger, selling whatever cheap crap he's managed to swindle a sucker out of. So this is your classic fixer, man. This is exactly the kind of stuff I want. I want fixers on street corners selling stuff out of a jacket. All right, that's that real fixer roleplay. But yeah, this guy will sell you scrap, he'll sell you information, he'll sell you whatever. He's a fixer, and being on a street corner in the middle of the old combat zone, I imagine, surprisingly, might get you quite a lot of the inside scoop on some things. Now, here's a fun fact. There are a couple of locations here in the old combat zone that have extremely tight security. And one of them is Jesse James's Kosher Deli. This building is the heart of Edge Runners Inc. They love it here. It's not actually a deli, nor is it kosher. It's apparently a traditional English pub mixed with a mixed martial arts studio. So, I guess that is a kosher deli in some sort of sense of the word. The core of the building is a sunken area that's like sort of a sunken arena that kind of dominates the main area, usually filled with tables. However, when there is a dispute, the tables get removed, bulletproof plexiglass is raised around the edges, and the disagreement is then settled in a civilized manner. They beat the freak out of each other until they come to an understanding. There are rules to the deli. Number 1 is use your damn words first. When they don't work, see rule number 2. Rule number 2 is settle your scores here with fists, not blades or guns. And then finally, don't be a bully. Don't pick a fight with people who can't fight back. So those are the 3 rules you have to keep in mind here at Jesse James's Kosher Deli. There's, of course, also Substation 12, which also has a security code of 10. This was it's one of the new areas made specifically to, I guess, provide some help. If that makes sense. It is a new power substation. So this is entirely helping to fund and fuel the old combat zone, which is why it's security code 10, because it's one of the most important locations in the entire district. And then lastly, we have the underground. And here's a fun little thing. Place is run by the Shroomers. That's right. This is the only location in Old Combat Zone that has such an intense Shroomer presence. And if you don't remember what the Shroomers are, they're a bunch of hippies that like to grow mushrooms. I know. Crazy. But, yeah. There is a old, derelict N-cart maintenance depot underneath the streets out in, like, the tunnels. And, of course, it is run by the Shroomers. They cultivate fungus and lichen and a massive subterranean gardens. They're friendly, mostly. If your journey does take you underground, you best approach them with some caution, some care, be nice. And they'll be nice in return. But you don't want to mess them up because they will give you, I don't know, a brain-eating fungus or something. It's pretty bad. It says here the shrooms are descended from folks who studied cordyceps while growing psychotropic mushrooms. So there you go. If you want to get infected with cordyceps, mess with the Shroomers. That sounds like a great idea. If you wish to know more about the Shroomers, you can often find a few living in the Old Combat Zone. It's tradition for their young to go on a walkabout for a year upon reaching adulthood. It allows them to decide whether Shroomer life is truly for them, and to find mates to bring back to the family. Which, yeah, there you go. And I think we actually should just talk about the Shroomers as our metaphorical monster of the week, because we've already been discussing them, and they're very cool. The Shroomers are, as you can see, they're present in the Old Combat Zone, but mostly underground, in this sort of tunnel. But that's not the only place Shroomers can be. You can get Shroomers pretty much anywhere. There's even, so these are the dirty hippies, but to me, they're similar enough to the Shroomers to where I imagine there might be some crossover. But the dirty hippies are the Shroomers. The dirty hippies, they'll grow things on greenhouses on roofs. And the Shroomers are basically just like the opposite of that. They're the subterranean opposite of that, where instead of on rooftops, now they deal, in the N-cart systems and the sewers and all that other business. When you're playing a Shroomer, generally, I imagine most of them are going to be hippies. Either hippies or like people who are very into botany, gardeners, those types of people who have a sort of green thumb, I think you would imagine to see the most amongst the Shroomers. But of course, we do have to remember that they can be vindictive, that they're not peaceful necessarily. They are, for the most part, but if you mess with them, they have an opportunity. And we mentioned it earlier, the cordyceps thing. That can, personally, cordyceps alone, we already know, Last of Us, but that could lead to some interesting story, looking into the Shroomers and maybe having to wind up in the underground, to kind of deal with them. I don't know. Potentially, I think there's a lot of interest in the Shroomers. It's just, you don't really see too much about them. Because they're isolationist more than anything. They really don't interact too much with the people outside of their communities, except for when they go on their walkabout, which even then, when they're on their walkabout, I don't even think they're technically Shroomers, because they haven't made that decision to fully, involve themselves in the Shroomer life. So a real dedicated Shroomer is probably somebody who's isolationist, who spends a lot of time underground, who probably has some maybe new age beliefs, might be well connected and well versed to botany and the way plants work. Of course, I imagine a lot of Shroomers have special sort of talents when it comes to mushrooms and fungi, at least when knowledges and stuff. But really, as an organization, they shouldn't be necessarily antagonists, but more responding to being antagonized. And of course, there's plenty of groups like that in Night City, but out of all the ones out there, I think this one's technically, or one of the more interesting ones, just because of what they can do. They can literally attack you with fungus and all of the various different things that could imply. I mean, come on, fungus is terrifying. So, the Shroomers. Would I say I'm threatened by the Shroomers? No. Are they threatening? They can be. They definitely can be. And that is one of the best parts about Night City, isn't it? Just the most unassuming people can have the most terrifying shit held in their pockets. But that'll be it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about the Reclamation Zone and the Old Combat Zone. Next week, we're going to talk a bit more about Dungeons & Dragons, and then we're going to continue our series by heading into Northside. All right, I've been Tyler Hapney. I'm your host of Dungeons & Dystopias. Thank you so much for listening, and please come back next week.